Well, of course, the large dams on the large waterways are regulated by the Corps of Engineers. And the smaller dams, many of them in our state parks and our fisheries department are regulated by our state conservation department. And then our private dams, as far as I know, there is no regulating agency, either federal or state, that looks after those.
So there are a lot of private dams that don't have to answer to anyone, just go ahead and build.
As far as I know, that's correct.
Do you have any idea of any locations in the state that would be considered potentially dangerous or hazardous?
George, I do not. If I did, we'd be out there this afternoon trying to encourage the owners to do something about it. Now, we did have an occasion or two recently, but the most recent one has been up in Lake Highland, privately owned dam and subdivision that had some trouble with the structure of their dam, and through the help of the Corps of Engineers, we made a survey of what they needed, and they have just recently completed repairs on their dam.
So the question of whether the inspection of these dams inventoried would be carried out has been held up by this political question of who's going to do it, states or federal. It's also held up who's going to put up the money to make the inspection and who's going to enforce it.
Should the dam break or something, do you have any plan in this regard?
We certainly do, George. 2 or 3 years ago, when the Idaho Dam broke, Governor Wallace was deeply concerned about the dams in Alabama, and he asked us to get busy and find out the condition of dams in Alabama that might be hazardous. So we are in the process now of developing a plan for our entire state that would tell us where the dams are located that might be hazardous to our population, and the number of people that would have to be evacuated in the event the dam should go bad.
The apparent political vitality of the continuing war among the people's representatives and utilities was apparent as the Wallace petition hearing got underway. Commissioner Ziegler started things off with comments directed to an old PSC sparring partner.
Well, there must have been some mistake, because I have a letter in front of me here from Governor Beasley asking that this commission take action to reduce the electric rates of Alabama Power Company. And I think surely action speaks louder than words, and that surely he must intend to be here today and be a party in this proceeding. I'd like to suggest that we take a recess and have our executive secretary contact Mr. Beasley and make sure he hadn't forgotten about this hearing today.
And also docket number 17451 on behalf of 11 industrial customers of Alabama Power Company.
And it's very unfortunate when the governor takes these positions, especially when he knows that that is incorrect. The rates today are the rate of return earned by the company to pay the interest cost and other costs of the company are less than what the commission granted in the last rate proceeding. So it's very unfortunate that the governor takes these positions, but we're here today to talk about this, and the burden is certainly upon us to discuss this with our public and our customers, and we're happy to do so.
17439 7439, and also docket number 17451 on behalf of 11 industrial
The burden of this hearing is resting on the shoulders of Governor Wallace's attorneys, who, in the face of Alabama Power Company experts, must prove in a convincing manner that the state's consumers are being charged too much for their electricity. Bill Weaver, WSFA TV News, at the State Office Building in Montgomery.
Well, basically, we're a running team, and we can throw the football. We got a good throwing quarterback and several good receivers. Miles Sports, our quarterback, and our ends are Chris Oswalt and Willie Miles and Bert Barrow. All three of those have been real fine receivers for us this year. Done a good job for us.
What about defensively? How are you looking there?
Defensively, we've gotten stronger, I think, since the first ball game, and I think our opponent Cloverdale has done the same thing. And we've tightened up some spots. We defensive end Elmore House and Terrence Smith, and linebackers Roger Self and Steve Strickland, and nose guard Clark Harris has really come along and helped the team getting stronger.
Is there anything you learned after that first game from Cloverdale? Anything you'll try to do differently for this game?
Well, I don't know about differently. We're going to get out there and try to do things better than what we did before, but differently, I don't think we're going to do anything different.
Okay.
Oh, come off the ball. Get off the ball. Chuck, get off the football.
But I believe after the first ball game, and like I say, they've had a seasoned team. You know, they are undefeated as 7th, 8th, and 9th graders. And we were extremely young. We started 2 kids in the backfield that had never played any football in the first ball game. And they've improved considerably. And, of course, our line has matured, and they know their jobs a good bit better. And we think that from this, we've improved a lot. As far as any different we would do, we just try to not make mistakes. We fumbled the football 6 times in the first ball game that hurt us.
Okay, Mayor, we're about an hour before showtime, and it looks like everybody's getting ready to go.
Well, that's right. We have to get the horse dressed out, have to put the tack on him, get the bridle and the saddle and the chains or boots, whatever we use on his feet, get the tail brace on his tail, and as you'll note here, keep the tails tied up to keep them clean and out of the dirt and in the stall, and then we...
Let's see that. Can we back him around and see that tail? Wait a minute, Mayor, this is not that long flowing tail that we're used to seeing.
Well, see, we keep it tied up to keep it clean so we don't have to wash it so often.
Now, many walking horses have false tails, don't
They're
they?
called switches, wigs that they put on them, like some of these ladies use wigs, some of these horses do. Thank goodness with the Bandit we don't have to use a false tail.
He
He's got enough hair of his own, that's right.
Terrific. Now, you warm your horse up before the show. Is this a kind of like a pitcher warming up to see if he's got the good motion and everything?
That's right. See how he's working out of the bridle, and if you got the right size chains on him or the right boots, and then just to warm him up, get him freed up before showtime.
Okay. As soon as we get ready, we'll do some of that.
All righty. Be ready in just a few minutes.
All right. Billy, is this a critical time when you're warming your horse up to see how he's working?
Yes, sir. It sure is real critical.
What are the things you're looking for?
He's level up front, reaching with both feet, breaking the same with both legs, and making sure everything's just right.
He looks like he warms up quick. He looks
Yes,
like
sir.
he's doing good early, huh?
Yes, sir. He sure does. He warms up real quick. It don't take much for warming up for this horse.
Now, people notice that walking horses get down real low in the back. Why do they do that?
Well, the weight up front that we put on them.
Mm-hmm. Makes them look better, too, if they're real low in the back, don't they?
Yes, sir. Sure does. It makes them look real. Put in the bridle, makes them rear up higher, showy.
What does the rider do while he's in the saddle? What is his action?
He's got the feel of the horse, how he's feeling under him, and the way hay feels in the mouth, how we got him bitted up there and all that.
Mm-hmm. Bandit's a pretty good horse, huh?
Yes, a real nice horse. He's an amateur world champion horse. He's a juvenile world champion, and this horse, he's 8 years old, and he's a real nice, outstanding horse.
Well, basically, we're a running team, and we can throw the football. We got a good throwing quarterback and several good receivers. Miles Sports, our quarterback, and our ends are Chris Oswalt and Willie Miles and Bert Barrow. All three of those have been real fine receivers for us this year. Done a good job for us.
What about defensively? How are you looking there?
Defensively, we've gotten strong, I think, since the first ball game, and I think our opponent Cloverdale has done the same thing, and we've tightened up some spots. We defensive end Elmore House and Terrence Smith, and linebackers Roger Self and Steve Strickland, and nose guard Clark Harris has really come along and helped the team getting stronger.
Is there anything you learned after that first game from Cloverdale? Anything you'll try to do differently for this game?
Well, I don't know about differently. We're going to get out there and try to do things better than what we did before, but differently, I don't think we're going to do anything different.
Okay.
Oh, come off the ball. Get off the ball. Jump, get off the football.
But I believe after the first ball game, and like I said, they've had a seasoned team. You know, they are undefeated as 7th, 8th, and 9th graders. And we were extremely young. We started 2 kids in the backfield that had never played any football in the first ball game. And they've improved considerably. And, of course, our line has matured, and they know their jobs a good bit better. And we think that from this, we've improved a lot. As far as any different we would do, we just try to not make mistakes. We fumbled the football 6 times in the first ball game that hurt us.
In the early morning hours, Montgomery police made 2 lightning-like drug raids. At 77 Hopper Street, a man and his wife were arrested and charged with having cocaine. At 1310 Peach Street, 4 persons were arrested and charged with having a virtual drug factory. Authorities discovered marijuana, heroin, drug paraphernalia, scales, spoons, and $325 in cash. They also found a weapon on the premises. Montgomery Police Corporal Detective David Green explains what occurred.
Yes, this all started by a telephone call. We received some information that a gentleman over on Peach Street had a quantity of heroin in his house, and that this man was dealing heroin here in Montgomery. After we received the information and checked it out as best we could, we sent an undercover police officer to that house for the purpose of making an undercover drug buy of heroin. And this happened at about 3 o'clock this morning. A police officer went in and bought heroin from an individual inside the house. After the heroin was bought, we came back to police headquarters and obtained a search warrant for the residence.
Oh.
And once the search warrant was obtained, we returned to the residence, which was just prior to 6 o'clock this morning, and executed the search warrant. Upon searching the residence, we discovered a fairly large quantity of heroin inside the house, along with some marijuana. I think there was a small amount of phencyclidine, which is a hallucinogenic type drug. Several items of drug paraphernalia, such as needles and syringes and this sort of thing, bags for packaging marijuana. Probably between $3,000 and $5,000 worth of drugs, total drugs seized.
Would you call this a drug factory, and do you normally find this variety of narcotics in a raid?
Yeah, Norman, this is the brown or Mexican type heroin that we found this time, and that's usually what we find when we find heroin in Montgomery.
Both operations in the early morning hours today had one unusual quirk about them. They both came as a result of tips from informants, and they occurred within the same hours as the tips came in. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News reporting.
Federal census in 1980, the 10-year federal census that takes place in 1980, period of time to gear up to provide the service.
where the people are just very anxious to come into the city limits, because the other day, fire truck went out there to answer a fire. However, one of the points that we have gleaned in our study is that a lot of the businesses, biggest part of the businesses, are in under the Mosquito Act or the industrial.
Well, all annexation of Montgomery since its incorporation in 1819 has been just with a little dab here and a little dab there. And as a result, Montgomery has such irregular lines as not to be believed. And we think it is the prudent thing to do is to straighten up the lines on section lines and township lines and to provide for the orderly growth of the city of Montgomery.
All of these directions around here as the city expands, so that if we make the annexation effective January 1980, whether we do the annexation or whether we don't, there is a requirement for a redistricting. So we will accept it.
Well, I don't have any idea yet. That's the thing that I'm going to have to find out as of now. In other words, I'm not going to take any position on this plan. I'm going to give myself time to survey it, and of course, as chairman of the delegation, we'll have a lot of public hearings, and we'll allow the people to come in, and we'll hear their voice and whatever they want. If they're for annexation and want to come into the city, then I'll do all I can to help them do so. If they're opposed to it, then I'll guarantee you in for a fight.
I'm opposed to the mayor's plan because under the present plan, the black city councilman will lose seats. We will lose, I know, one city councilman seat with black, and there's a possibility of losing two. So therefore...
How do you figure that?
Because of the areas that they are bringing in, they're going to bring in approximately 18,000 additional people, and these individuals are white.
Here in South Lawn, the annexation plan is a welcome one for many of its residents. South Lawn, you may remember, has been the scene of numerous fires, some of them worsened by the lack of full city fire protection. So for these residents and for residents of various other sections of town which would be included in the annexation, the question is not if, but when. This is Dave Rickey, WSFA TV News reporting.
Three children were killed today in Birmingham when a fire of unknown origin engulfed a wooden house in the city's southwest section. The children were apparently alone at the time of the blaze. A natural gas well burned hotter and shot flames higher in the sky today near Chatham, Alabama, as it began to spew more liquid gas, which burns at a higher temperature. Workmen near the southwest Alabama well monitored air in the vicinity to make sure that no dangerous gases were being expelled. Governor Wallace has decided not to call a special election to fill the House seat occupied by Representative Thomas Reed of Tuskegee. A Wallace spokesman said today that the governor thinks the question of whether Reed vacated his office when he was convicted of trying to bribe another Senate officer should be settled either in court or by the House. That's News Update. Stay tuned for NBC Nightly News at 5:30. Details of these and other state and local stories on the WSFA 6 o'clock report.
Well, I appreciate the fact that ConAgra is making its announcement of an expansion program in Coffee County, approximately 300 new employees that will be added to the...
We certainly are very appreciative of the governmental approach to business in Alabama. I was commenting to one of the men outside there that the state government in Alabama has a good attitude toward business and industry, which we think says a great deal for why we're having so much industrial growth here.
I appreciate your attitude about our state, because our state knows that new industrial development and expansion is certainly what we need to have a balanced economy. And Alabama does believe in the profit system and the free enterprise system, and I think that's well known to you and others. So again, I want to thank you for this expansion program that will employ many new people in enterprise in the Coffee County area.
J.E. McTeer is in his 70s. He's a former sheriff and he's a voodoo doctor from South Carolina. McTeer is considered by many voodoo practitioners as one of the important leaders of the voodoo culture in the United States. His specialty is white magic, or removing spells from people. His patients swear by his powers. Here he relates a battle with another voodoo doctor.
So I went to Dr. Buzzard and I said, you want to tell your other witch doctors that you're going to quit giving medicine orally. That a witch doctor doesn't give medicine orally. He practices through the mind. And Dr. Buzzard looked at me and says, you think you can make me quit? I said, I can try. He said, well, I know you've got power, and I know you were raised with witch doctors. But you make me quit. Well, shortly after that, after we declared war on each other, a tragic accident happened in his family. And he gave me credit for it.
McTeer now sees about 3 patients a day to have all kinds of things done, from removing a hex to improving the patient's luck. When most people think of voodoo, an image like this comes to mind. A group of blacks in Africa huddled in a hut saying strange things, or someone pricking a doll with pins. Those are only 2 ways of voodoo involvement. While preparing for this series, we visited a shop on Perry Street in downtown Montgomery, which specializes in items used in the practice of voodoo. During our several visits there, a number of well-dressed, articulate customers made purchases of voodoo items. We were told the people are regular patrons of the shop. It appears there's no stereotype of a voodoo worshiper. They may come from all segments of the community, and race is no barrier. Black and white are known to adhere to the voodoo. Another side of the subject appears to be the voodoo quacks or con men who've established themselves as voodoo or witch doctors and con customers out of large sums of money. Police sources around the state have told us of several instances where so-called voodoo con artists operated in Alabama. They cite one instance in Dallas County where a man posing as a voodoo doctor said he drove snakes from people, especially women and young girls, that he drove out their evil like a purported exorcist. Police say a number of parents brought their daughters to the man and paid various sums to have the snakes driven out of their children. Some husbands are also known to have delivered their wives to the man for treatment which investigators say involves sex with the patients. The doctor is now doing time in an Alabama penitentiary. He was convicted on carnal knowledge charges. He is white. His patients were black and white. The death of Coosa County preacher the Reverend William Maxwell and resulting rumors about his work in the black arts and voodoo has created much interest in the occult. But so far, no one has produced any concrete evidence that Maxwell did indeed practice voodoo. Even so, many people in Coosa County believe Maxwell had powers and that he will return from the grave. Maxwell was a pulpwood worker who cut and sold timber. He did his work in $250 suits and drove to work in a Lincoln Continental. Theologists say that no man can live without some kind of faith, no matter what it is called. They say it gives meaning to his existence and helps integrate him within his groups. With every belief, there is a circumstances that created it, that created its practice, its effect, and even its origin. So it is for voodoo, and for those who follow it, it is the most important belief in the world. For them, it is the matter of life and death, and only true believers can explain it.
Mr. Floyd, you say the people of Wetumpka are heritage rich and preservation proud. What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean that the Elmore County in Wetumpka has a rich heritage, and I mean the people are very proud of it, and they're restoring a great deal of it.
What are some of the things they have to work with here?
Well, the log cabin that we can see in the background here was an 1840 log cabin. The river, the Tallapoosa and the Coosa, the county's history is tied very directly to the river because of the Indian heritage and because of the Cotton Kingdom and the events that took place during the Creek Indian Wars.
What about preservation today? What are some of the things that are happening here in addition to the log cabin, the things that you've mentioned here?
Wetumpka has three very well preserved churches, the Methodist, the Presbyterian, and the Baptist Church. And back of the Methodist Church is the Wetumpka Railway Depot, which is being restored by a group of the younger members of the church.
Well, what's that like over there? Is it worth saving?
Yes, it is. It's a very fine railway depot and very important transportation evidence.
What about some of the historical aspects of this particular community?
Well, the history of Elmore County is a relatively new county created in 1866, but the events that took place in Elmore County date back to prehistoric times, and then it's rich in Indian heritage. Hernando de Soto came through here in 1540. William Bartram came through here in 1776. And if you take those events and the other travelers who came to this area and the important battles that were fought in this general area and the power of the Creek Confederacy, and then on down to pioneer times, the history is very rich.
What about Alexander McGilvery?
Alexander McGilvery lived a few miles north of Wetumpka, and he was a very powerful part Creek Indian and had a great deal of influence with the United States and also with Europe.
Now, there's some real attractions in some of the areas around here. For example, you were telling me that there is a music museum.
Yes, down US 231 is probably the world's best collection of organs dating back
The world's best collection?
Yes, it dates back to the 1840s, and Mr. Green has collected them from all parts of the world. He has a few Alabama organs, and you really can see the evolution of the musical organ when you go into this museum.
And then, of course, there's Fort Toulouse. Is that probably the best-known tourist attraction here?
Yes.
That and the gardens?
Yes, Fort Toulouse and Jasmine Hill would be the best-known tourist attractions. And Fort Toulouse will be a major tourist attraction. It very well may attract 250 to 350,000 visitors a year when the work is completed.
Mr. Floyd, if somebody were driving around, they decided to come to Wetumpka to spend a Sunday afternoon and look around, what should they see?
Well, I think one thing they should see is the place where we're standing. I think Cromwell's Landing is very historic. Boats have landed here since the early 1800s. Across the river is the cotton docking wharfs, and then the bridge that spans the river is a very fine bridge, concrete arch bridge of the early 1930s. It was an engineering masterpiece when it was built. And then the building up the road here is an 1850s brick commercial landmark. The oldest penitentiary in the South is located on US 231. It was built in 1839, and it was the Alabama State Penitentiary. And then up the road from there...
Well, what about that penitentiary? Was Alabama a leader in penal institutions at that time?
Yes, Alabama did have some very forward programs in penal care at that time, and they built this massive evidence, which is now the two-story sprawling brick building is now used for the Elmore County Road Department.
What would you say, dealing with historical things, that this would be a good center for one day?
Well, I think it's one of the best places in the United States to see the relationship of our Indian heritage, the history of America, the relationship of the geography. We're in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains, and we're also in the area of the Coosa and Tallapoosa River, where they flow together to form the Alabama, the location of Fort Toulouse. I think we get a good idea of engineering, transportation, military, Indian heritage all in one county.
You say that we're at the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains.
Yes, the last outcropping of rock in the Appalachians does occur in Elmore County. Many Alabamians want to bring the Appalachian Trail down from Rome, Georgia, all the way to Fort Toulouse, and then to tie it directly to the Bartram Trail, which will come across central Alabama and make its way through Montgomery and on down to Mobile. And that way we would be one of the few states anywhere where we would have two major trails, would be dissecting in our state.
Wetumpka has an unusual new mental health center, I understand.
Yes, and I think that Tarwater very vividly does contrast with the older buildings of downtown Wetumpka. It's a 1930s courthouse built during WPA times, and its structures built in the 1850s, 1880s, 1890s, and during the first part of the 20th century. It's a very, very appealing, modern, contemporary building.
What is it used for, the Tarwater mental health?
Tarwater is a mental health facility that is being developed as part of Alabama's program developed by the Department of Mental Health. It is, as I understand it, it's an outpatient center.
What about the houses? Aren't there some old pretty houses here?
Tuskegee Street is that general district, and the streets that feed into Tuskegee is a good place to see two-story and one-story Greek Revival cottages, many Victorian houses, and a number of Italianate structures. It is a very good historic district, and it is being nominated to the National Register of Historic Places.
Do you have many places here in Wetumpka that are on registers, either national, state, or local?
Yes, we do. We have the depot, the Baptist Church, in the Alabama Register, the Methodist and Presbyterian churches in the National Register, the Penitentiary, Fort Toulouse, and many other landmarks that are either in the National Register or, in the case of Toulouse, it's a National Historic Landmark, the very highest designation.
Rich in history, then, and preservation proud.
Yes.
Well, we first had a armed robbery of the KO station on North Court Street. En route to this call, Officer Milam, who is a motorman, spotted a car on the interstate on I-65 headed south at a high rate of speed. He pursued this vehicle, and when he got it stopped, one of the black males, there were two in the car, one of the black males in the car opened fire on him, hitting his helmet. He was not injured. He claimed to only have a headache. At this point, he called in for assistance. One of the west side cars picked his car up and pursued it Mill Street, the extreme west end of Mill Street, at which time the two black males abandoned the vehicle and ran into a wooded area.
Well, we feel that we're prepared to handle an unusual situation. We have certain procedures that are established that we go through should an accident occur in our cities. We have literature and material that's readily available on the most common type materials on how to handle it. If it's beyond this, then we have toll-free numbers and communication center that 24 hours a day that we can call and get immediate attention, and they will give us the information that we need how to handle that, or put us in touch with someone that can. And we have used these numbers in the past years from time to time, and it's worked completely successful.
Thank you, Ivy. Well, there you have it. Butcher, baker, candlestick maker, doctor, lawyer, accountant, they're all there in line. And it's the largest line that courthouse officials have ever seen. In fact, this morning about 8 o'clock, the line was right here where I'm standing. And many of the people who were going into the courthouse now have been waiting here since 8 o'clock in the morning, and they're going to be glad to get this over with. As I said, it's the largest line that officials here have ever seen, and perhaps someone who could show some light on the subject would be Lloyd Smith, who works with the probate office. Have you any idea why the line is this size?
Bill, yesterday or day before, I thought maybe I knew, but this morning, after talking to several people, there are just so many reasons. I just don't think that you could pin it down to any one reason, other than maybe people have just put it off and it slipped up on them.
Do you think you'll have this bad of a problem in coming years? Is this a sign of the times?
Certainly we are hoping not. We hope that everybody could get down when we don't have to experience these long lines and inconvenience them for the amount of time it takes them to get the license.
How many have you put through so far just this week in the line?
This week, right about now, over 7,500 to 8,000, somewhere in that neighborhood.
And how many by tonight, do you think?
By the night, we will have put through a little better than 10,000 in the last 2 days.
I understand there were about 140,000 mail-outs that went to various citizens in Montgomery County. How come not many of them have been utilized?
Everyone that registered a car in Montgomery County last year through, say, August of '77 should have received this mail-out tag. A lot of them just didn't elect to take the advantage of the mail-out. I hope they do next year.
Now, here's a crucial question. What's going to happen at 5 o'clock today?
At 5 o'clock this afternoon, a deputy sheriff will go to the end of the line. And anyone in that line, regardless of where the line is, will be served before we go home tonight.
So, in other words, the folks at the courthouse may be working a long time tonight.
We'll be here till the last person is served.
Thank you very much,
Thank you,
Mr.
Bill.
Smith. Well, there you have it. There's still a chance to get your car tag if you're one of the healthy citizens of Montgomery and like a beautiful evening in the downtown section of Montgomery. Bill Weaver, WSFA TV News, live from the Montgomery County Courthouse.
Okay.
Shoot some. Oh, no shit. I'm sorry.
You better be careful, you get some of the same people in the background.
Well, let's try to get him to where we just see maybe a few people going in the courthouse door, so they can't really nail it down.